Thank you all for coming. This is the question time event that we normally have at the end of our face-to-face traditional Essex course. We made a decision as part of the virtual sessions we're going to run this year for the Essex course. This is something we could easily and probably almost improve on by doing it online, if not equal. And we're really honoured to have three brilliant guests at the moment, but soon to be 4 guests who I think are going to be very informative, entertaining, and interesting. I'm going to just go through the guest list and describe them. I'm going to be channeling my best Fiona Bruce as I do that. I've opted not to do the whole physical transformation, but hopefully you can sense my Fiona Bruce coming through under the surface. It'll be almost as good as BBC Question Time. So first of all, I'm really pleased to welcome Annie Hall. So Annie rings at Warwick. She is one of these very modern ringers that has one band that rings in 2 different towers. They share the towers between them, which may be something that comes up in some of the comments as to the advantages and disadvantages of that, but something that may become increasingly required. But she learned to ring at she learned to ring in Leicester, actually, having spent time in Wimborne. She described to me yesterday that she learned to ring during a row, which seems to involve a light programme. And I challenge anybody to say that any way it takes, Annie. But people still talk about the light programme now, so it could have happened 2 years ago, who knows. She's currently the General Secretary of the Coventry Guilds. She's also Central Council representative, and she spends a lot of time and enjoys working with the Coventry Spires youth team. But probably her most prominent role at the moment is as the coordinator of the Recovery Champions, working with the Association of Ringing Teachers, a role which probably does have another title, but which I am banned from using, but something else will introduce later on in the conversation. So welcome, Annie. There would normally be a round of applause in BBC, so we'll have to have virtual applause. Mark Davis learnt to ring in Gloucestershire in the 1980s. You were remarkably vague about that yesterday, Mark, when we spoke about it. I can remember the dates and the time when I started ringing. I suspect you can as well. But
no.
Again, things are dating. He's a real enthusiast about bell ringing theory, having spent a lot of time working on method theory, but also pure compositions. And is probably best known for his work with Methoduku, which is prominent in the ringing world and ringing community. And I think was probably a stocking filler for most of us on this call in our Christmas stocking. He's also the Appeal Secretary of the Gloucester and Bristol Essex Association, Central Council rep for a few years, and he works in a technical committee. But I was really struck actually by his ability to multi-talent, because apparently he can write poetry while swimming and eating cheese all at the same time, which I thought was remarkable. So welcome, Mark. Thank you for joining.
I mean, when that happens, the poetry mostly is about cheese and swimming, but you know.
yeah, well, exactly. Will Bosworth is very well known for being the editor of the Ringing World, but less well known for having come from Dorset. He's either the product of a 2nd or 3rd generation ringing family. It's not really clear. It could be argued either way, but certainly comes from a ringing lineage. And having attended music college in Birmingham, he then attended finishing school, bell ringing finishing school in Cambridge, and honed his bell ringing skills whilst in Cambridge. As well as working for the Ringing World, he's a lay clerk at Peterborough Cathedral, and he is also a linguist. He can talk to cats. So welcome very much, Will. Thank you for joining us. And Dylan will join us soon. Dylan Thomas is a young ringer, and we're very honoured to welcome him when he's able to join us. He rings in Wellington in New Zealand, which is other side of the globe, and the time in New Zealand tomorrow is very different from the time here. He stumbled across a YouTube video when he was a young teenager of bells ringing in Munich, and that was a fateful moment for him because it very much fixed in his head an interest in what would become a love of bell ringing. But it was still several years until he found bells, and then another couple of years until he actually entered the tower. And he's been ringing for 2 years and 3 months. He won an Association of Ringing Teachers Award in 2020 as an achievement award, really because of his ringing progress. He's made remarkable progress over a very short period of time in a part of the world where there is less ringing than we have in England, so more difficult to make progress. And I can certainly relate to that given my background, so I think it's remarkable that he's made the progress he has. So well done, Dylan, when you join us. And look forward to hearing from you. Brilliant. Impeccable timing, Dylan.
Yeah. I was sleeping.
You've just missed your introduction, so you can avoid the cringing that everybody else has had to do. So it's really great to have you joining us. Welcome.
was the
Brilliant time.
He mostly said nice things. So
They were entirely nice things. Right, so we have a number of questions submitted in advance, and I may be persuaded to take any questions from the floor as well that come up. But in the basis of our discussion tonight will be a series of questions that were submitted in advance, and I'm going to direct them at particular panel members that I think might be useful to start the discussion. But I think we'll hear from all our panel members at some length on most of these questions tonight. So the first question is going to, I think it'd be good if we could start with you, Will, on this one. So potentially quite a personal question. What's your preference and why? And there's a part B to this: tower bells, handbells, or virtual bells?
Wow, good one. I mean, there's something to enjoy about all of them, I think. But what's always attracted me about ringing is the mental stretching. I love that feeling of having learned something and then being able to execute it, and that team feeling of having achieved it. And I find that's really quite focused on handbells, that feeling. So I do enjoy handbells, and I like the fact that handbells are lower stress as well. You're sitting in someone's front room, and if it all goes to pot, then you just put the bells down. You haven't embarrassed any of the public or anything like that. So I do like that. But there's also, I mean, I suspect everyone on the call is a tower bell ringer, and we know that there's something physically so enjoyable about the motion of ringing a tower bell. It's like walking or swimming. It's a physically enjoyable thing to do, and that sound is so unique. So I think possibly handbells, but it's a tight one, and I wouldn't want to give either of them up.
Yeah, good, thank you. When it comes to handbell top trumps, tunes or changes? Oh,
changes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I really hope that something that comes out of this pandemic is lots more bands ringing handbells for their community, for church services and that kind of thing, because I think it's a great outreach tool for ringing. I think the public, whenever I've done kind of public handbell touches in concerts or carol services or whatever, people always love it. So it's
quite hard, isn't it, doing public handbell ringing when you're used to, say, sitting in a living room, when you're doing it for an audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Dylan, what's the New Zealand view? What do people prefer in New Zealand, or what do you prefer in New Zealand? What type of ringing?
I'm tower bells all the way. The motion of ringing and the sound, it can't be beaten for me. But I love handbells because you can take them with you and do them anywhere. And I think they're a lot more, mentally in my mind, they're a lot more different, much more difficult, and very, it took me so long to get the things on handbells right, rather than, and tower bells, it sort of took me about a third of the time it took me to get master them on handbells. But my actual preference would be, if I had to choose one, it would be tower bells all the way. It's just the motion and the sound can't be just the best for me.
And where's your favorite ring? If you had to pick your desert island ring, if I was Lauren Laverne instead of Fiona Bruce, which ring of bells would you be taking to desert island with you?
Well, I haven't rung at many towers, but oh god, this is like the world's most difficult choice.
Yeah. Choosing your favourite child, isn't it? It's impossible.
Well, if I had to choose one from a ring that I'd already rung at, I'd pick Wellington, obviously. But if I had another one in the UK that I could just choose, it would probably be Redcliffe, St Mary Redcliffe.
Yeah,
they sound fantastic in my mind.
Yeah,
they really
absolutely do. Yeah,
I think that'd be a popular choice.
Brilliant. Yeah.
It was lovely to hear Gareth Lawson posted a video of him, the last chunk of tolling on the Redcliffe tenor today, and it was. I haven't run there for several years now, and it was like, oh wow, yeah, I remember what they sound like. Yeah,
it sounds great. The muffled stroke was just beautiful, wasn't it?
Somewhere I've never been. I'm jealous. You've obviously. beat me to it. Annie, what would your order be?
I agree with Will that they all have pros and cons with them. I think it's tower bells for me. I haven't really got on quite so well with Ringing Room. We use it, and I think it's a great tool for teaching learners, and it's got its benefits and people can see it, and I have enjoyed it, but I haven't found that I've got a natural leaning towards it. And when we have our district and guild meetings, we have breakout rooms where we go into and ring with Ringing Room, and then we have another room where we can sit and chat. And I do find myself sometimes sitting in the room chatting rather than going into the Ringing Room. Although we did have a practice on Easter Monday when we were ringing Stedman triples, so we are using it. But it's interesting listening to what Dylan says, because I stopped myself thinking, well, I wonder which is my favourite peal of bells and where I would take to a desert island. And I don't think I've ever thought about it before, but I think I'd take Monk's Kirby, a nice heavy 8 with me.
Think about a nice heavy 8, isn't there? I was thinking about a heavy 8 as well, actually, in my head. Good, thank you. And Mark, I mean, last but not least, anything to say about e-bells? Nobody's mentioned e-bells yet. Well,
I have got some e-bells. Actually, I haven't actually made a lot of use of them yet, to be fair, partly through lack of time and partly because I've got very used to just pressing keys in Ringing Room. And I will stand up and give a shout to online ringing, I think, because there's pros and cons with everything. But one thing that Ringing Room has taught me is that, I mean, it's so far away in many senses from real ringing. It's maybe got a little bit closer with the higher quality bell sounds. Actually, that's made a really big improvement to the pleasure of using it. But the rope sight, there is rope sight, but it's nothing like the rope sight from either handbells or ringing tower bells. Obviously, the physical action is nothing like Ian, other of those. But actually, once you're into it and once you've got a band ringing it well around you, it really is ringing, and I think it tells us something about what ringing is and just how universal that concept of change ringing is, and how wonderful the essence of it is. So I think that's been a real amazing thing that I've learnt with Ringing Room, and I've loved using it. It was really hard to start with. It's a massive learning curve, and I think virtually everyone found they were right back at the beginning, almost like you got to learn to handle again and ring plain bob and all the rest of it. But I'll definitely give a big shout out. I love handbells and I love tower bells. I'm going to place them all equal favourites.
Fair enough. I think
it's
that's
ringing.
The final panelist prerogative is to choose all three as equal. Thank you. That was a really great place to start. Thank you for that. The next question is something I'm going to maybe ask Annie to break the ice on, if that's all right. Partly because of your interest in teaching. So, do you think that Ringing Room will continue to be used in the way that it is now, or do you think it will develop into a different sort of teaching tool over time? What's the future of Ringing Room?
Oh, what a good question. It was something I was thinking about today, really, because one thing we've learned from using Zoom, which was alien to many of us, and Ringing Room, is that we can use them for the theory part of ringing so much easier than wasting time in the tower, when we can put people straight on the ropes if they've done their homework. And I can remember the days, when people would come in with their diaries, with the diary with the methods that they hadn't learned properly, just to make sure they could remember the starts or the coursing order or whatever that we used to. And I think that's how we will probably use Ringing Room going forward. I think it's a terrific tool with learners, with people that we found, with people who hadn't been ringing so long. It was a great way to show them how to run out to the back, how to run into the front. And the language that we use, which is alien to learners, all of a sudden they could see what we meant about it. And so I thought that will be terrific and something that we will keep using. The other thing that I have to say is that when we had the youth band, we taught kids at Warwick School here. and we were using Able and things like that. They were red hot on that because it was part of their experience and not of ours. So we had to get up to speed with that to be able to work with them. And of course, now through using Ringing Room during this lockdown, we've all got up to speed with it. Yeah. So I think that will be a big part of teaching going forward.
Yeah, I agree. Mark, do you have an alternative view on that, or a largely similar view?
I think it will continue to be used for actual ringing. I think it's a great tool for training and teaching and learning and practicing stuff by yourself, particularly with Wheatley now built in. It's just it's a game changer, really, isn't it? And you know, actually, very early on in my ringing career, does anyone remember the Scion? Very early, you know, it wasn't even a phone, but it was a personal organizer, very big and bulky. But I wrote, I think probably was what the first ever program to practice blue lines on. So you could press keys back and forwards, and there's another key to make a place, and I used that to learn methods rather than write it out or repeat it in my head, and that was great. And then I moved on to using a bell, particularly to practice handbells. And now, whether it's handbells or just ringing a single line, you can get on with Ringing Room, set Wheatley off and ring and practice something. And I think that is fabulous, and I think that will be used more and more. And there's also, in terms of teaching and outreach, I think there's the potential, and I think Laura is doing amazing things with this. I think this could go a lot further. I think there's something in ringing, there's an appeal that is much wider than you know, the normal intake of ringers and the normal fairly UK centric you know, intake of ringers. I think there's much wider appeal. I think there's actually millions of people around the world who absolutely love it. And, you know, Ringing Room and maybe other platforms built around Ringing Room has the you know, the potential to spread the joy and excitement and the, you know, the everything that's amazing about learning to ring and learning to ring methods. Sure. So hopefully we'll see something of that. But whether Ringing Room will be used as much when we're back in the tower, I don't know. But I think it will continue to be used, yeah. And hopefully the training and the outreach will become really important parts of the tower bell ringing that we do too.
Do you think there's any risks, perhaps, or any unforeseen consequences that we stumble across as we are using it?
Well, there is one thing I've noticed, which is, you remember back in the old days when we, you know, like a year ago when we went up into the tower, if you were tasked with a method to learn, you would have to learn it. And I mean, some people, particularly the conductor, may be peering at the notes of the composition immediately before catching hold and saying, yeah, just learning the last course, chaps, you catch hold. But actually you meant to have learnt the method. But actually these days I've noticed more and more people are, oh, well, I don't need to learn the method because I'm going to have the blue line here. No, you know, it's beneath the range of my webcam, so nobody can see that. And so the culture is changing. And I'm not sure that's a good thing. Maybe I'm just old-fashioned, but
yeah, I don't know. But it's very obvious, isn't it? You can see this.
Yeah.
You see what that means.
Yeah.
One of the things, Andrew, we've been talking about with the recovery champions is the fact that many young people and more mature people as well that have been using Ringing Room have made a lot of practice with methods, and their experience on actual tower bells is going to be lagging right behind. And so when we get them back into the tower and they can ring Cambridge Minor or Cambridge Major, it's actually handling the bell might cause an issue to begin with. And so one of the things we're thinking about is how we're actually going to, what we can do to help people address that period so they don't switch off because, you know, they can do it in theory but not in practice.
Yeah, it's almost a bolt-on module one, isn't it? It's how to really buff up people's bell control so they can match the theoretical progress.
Well, I mean, that might be a problem because, you know, even before online ringing, you know, back in the old days, you know, you did get people with the right kind of minds who wanted to learn all the advanced methods but didn't really have the bell control to manage it. And we'll get more of that. Yeah. So I think we have to.
Handbells is what I see. Stick them on some handbells.
Yeah. Well, I think just the pleasure of actually handling a ton of bell metal and the joy of that rope in your hands, that's something which needs to be stressed, isn't it?
And Dylan, you've been lucky enough to ring for some time because New Zealand has amazing political leadership and became COVID 3 months ago. So we're all desperately envious of you. Have you used Ringing Room alongside tower ringing, or has it sort of disappeared?
We have done quite a lot. We've continued using it past lockdown for quite a long time, because I think more recently we've discovered, like, the Wheatley bot. They've realised how that is an incredibly good thing for lack of people. I think that we've often had Saturday morning practices where there've been not many people because I've just got a job, I've started working, so I can't go. Yeah. We've had a few people come off sick and who can't ring, and there's often not enough people on a Saturday, so they're just like, oh, okay, maybe we'll switch the practice to Ringing Room and use Wheatley. And I think that's a really good thing because it's mostly learners anyway. It's a learner's practice, so I think it's a really good thing to do theory on Ringing Room rather than go all the way into Wellington to do basically the same thing that morning. But also I think it's just because we like the aspect of ringing with people overseas as well, because we get a lot of people from the UK and the US who join our Zoom calls and ring with us, and they're really useful just to push our numbers up as well.
Sure. Yeah, so managing those long distances, it's definitely got place, isn't it?
Also, it's not just that we get to ring more complicated things on Ringing Room as well, because obviously you can, me and a couple of others can ring things like, surprise major in hand, like 2, but tower bells. Yeah. So that makes it easier for us to do that.
Yeah. Good. Right, moving on. We'll stay with you, Dylan, if that's all right, because I think you might have not more refreshing view on this next question, but certainly maybe is more refreshing. Anyway, I'm going to stop digging myself into a hole, otherwise I get beaten up. But what do you want from the Central Council, Dylan? What could the Central Council do for you that it doesn't?
Oh God, I have no idea.
What a good answer.
Why are you asking me this question? I don't even really think about the Central Council at all. They're a non-existent thing in my mind.
Method libraries. That's what you need them for.
No idea. I'm completely useless. Don't ask.
That's kind of what I thought you might say, or something similar. So, Mark, what's your, as a Central Council rep, what's your
well, as I say, I've just said it. I think the single most important function of the Central Council is maintaining the method libraries for us. So we all have a common set of names for the methods that we ring. And so that I can ring a new method here and other people can learn about it and ring it and know that it's called the same thing. And I'm slightly facetious about this. Obviously, there's lots of other wonderful things the Central Council is doing, and the coordination, nationwide coordination of all the various events and the troubles and the problems we've had recently. I think that's fantastic too, and there's a huge amount of work that gets done in the background. And I think maybe there are more reorganisations of the kind of the regional structure of ringing, which the Central Council may slowly push through. Because modernisation, of our organisations is always something sensible to look at. But, as a practical ringer, what I use all the time is I'm a method ringer. So I'm always looking at methods, and somebody says, oh, have you heard of this method? Or I'd like to ring something new. Can you find something? It's the method libraries, which we use all the time. And I think having a central body who sets the standards and keeps the records and curates all that stuff is really important. And actually, it's one of those things that when it works right, it fades away into the background. So there's some of the things the Central Council will do that are very high profile that we think, yes, I'm glad somebody's out there putting that together. But actually, if they're doing a good job, a lot of it is just providing the background for us to be able to ring. And I think it's often forgotten that, and we need to keep reminding ourselves that a lot of services that we rely on, there's amazing people doing fantastic work there, and if they do their best job, we don't see them. They're invisible. That's what the job is.
Anything the Central Council could improve on? Anything that it needs to think about for its future?
I don't know. Yeah, I think certainly that ringing does need to modernise. I think that's not all within the Central Council now. I think the regional associations have to kind of look to themselves too, and maybe the central organisations can help with that. I think I'm not sure I like the name, the Central Council. They considered changing it, didn't they, a few years back? But it does sound very Victorian to me somehow. So I think a change of name at some point would be good. Yeah, what else? Well, the other thing about this, I mean, it's changing a little bit, but when I first went along to Central Council meeting, which was only about 3 or 4 years ago, it was the Portsmouth one, and I was a newly elected rep for the GMB, and I'd not really been involved with the Central Council before that. I remember, I mean, I was 50 then, and I remember being picked out by Chris Mews saying, there's a youngster, right, come and ring in the service touch. We need a youngster. I'm like, I'm 50 years old, Chris, what are you talking about? But it was definitely, it's changing a little bit, but it was definitely a sea of grey hairs. It was retired people, but and that's not to say that, you know, when you're retired, you don't still have lots of great input that you can provide, and certainly you've got more spare time. It's very difficult to actually, like me, I'm raising a family still, and I'm working full time, and I'm doing Methoduku, so the time I've got to devote to the Central Council is relatively limited. But actually getting younger people involved is important too.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, Will, you're a bell ringing journalist, amongst other things. What from that perspective, you know, the Ringing World reports on the Central Council, but also comments on the Central Council as well. What do you think the view of the journalist is in all this?
Oh wow, I think they have a really hard job, because I think in an ideal world the Central Council is representative but also shows leadership, and that's a really difficult balance to strike. You know, it's supposed to be a few people representing a few more people, representing a sort of pyramid structure, and therefore, you know, when the Guardian wants a word on bell ringing, they can go to the top and find someone representative. But also, I think we all agree that ringing, you know, needs to change if it's going to thrive and carry on. And so the Central Council kind of need to lead that change, and that's really difficult for them to be leading change when they're also supposed to be representing everyone. I think, I mean, shout out for them. I think they've done a fantastic job over the last year. I haven't agreed with every single decision that they've made, but I think in terms of making those decisions, you know, grabbing it and saying, look, this is a unified path. This is what we suggest that we all do. That's been brilliant. And, you know, so much work behind the scenes. I know as someone that puts out something where I know how much work has gone on behind the scenes, I know that there's a lot of time that goes into what comes out of the Central Council. So yeah.
And Annie, I mean, you're very involved in ART. Some people might argue that ART, although there's a relationship with Central Council, plugged a gap that Central Council wasn't filling. I mean, is that a fair comment, or
well,
are there other things that needs ART-like structures affiliated to Central Council, perhaps?
Well, I think they're working very well together with this the recovery champions. I think that's doing an excellent job, and I have to say, I agree with Will that the Central Council, as long as I can remember, has been criticised and blamed, and you know, it's not fit for purpose, which I disagree with. And I think the leadership that Simon Linford has shown through this pandemic has been excellent. And you know, I know my guild and many other guilds, on our front page we put the Central Council's latest guidance, because that people do look for it, and I think that's played such a significant part. It's an interesting question you raise about ART, because yes, I was one of the first founder members of ART when it started, earlier than I joined the Central Council, because I actually joined the year after Mark. So my first session was in Edinburgh, and I found it, well, actually I found it quite bad-tempered, to be quite honest.
Oh, really?
And since then, I think it's got better-tempered. but I was quite surprised really that there was such a lot of criticism about people that, like Will said, were doing so much work behind the scenes that I thought it was humbling actually, of what was going on. And I like the fact that the Guardian can pick the phone up and ring Vicky, because it saves them ringing around everybody else to find what they're doing in some remote place. You know, if we get a central opinion, it's far more effective for us as bell ringers to have that. When you talk about art and the Central Council, I think there's an interesting relationship there, because art is quite separate, isn't it, to the Central Council? So it's not the education arm of the Central Council. And I don't want to be controversial because I know there's all sorts of different things going on here. But as a member of art, I think that, you know, 99.8% of the bells we ring are in churches. So the Central Council of Church Bell Ringers, you know, we have an important feed in to the Central Council to make sure that we're providing ringers to ring in churches. And of course, I know there's dilemmas in there too, but I think that's how I would see it. I think they are quite separate. They both have contributions to make, but I'm delighted that they're working together for the future of Ringing Recovers.
Key mutual stakeholders and managementees, I think, at this time, isn't it?
Yes, that's a as a retired person, not using a lot of management speak, I like that.
Right, I think we should move on to safer territory. So this is a technical ringing question. This is somebody looking for some ringing advice, and I think also, again, Dylan, you learnt this more recently than the rest of us have, so you've probably got a more eloquent answer than the rest of us do. But the question is, how can I see who to follow, or when I pass the treble? What are your tricks for rope sight and knowing who to follow?
Oh, I don't even use rope sight that much anymore. Right. I listen quite a lot. You'll often see me when I'm ringing, actually just staring into the floor. I'll just stare into a corner of the room. Yeah. It's just, I've learned to listen over time. I barely even use rope sight anymore, because I think that it came once when I was ringing Grand Cicadas on the back 10, and I noticed the tenor ropes going down before the treble ropes. And I thought, oh gosh, that's a bit odd. Yeah. And it really put me off. Yeah. So that's why I don't even on lighter sixes where it doesn't matter anymore, I just stare blankly into a corner of the room. Yeah, it might as well be like a black hole over my eyes. I don't see anything. I just go, I don't know, just listening. I don't know how to say, to know who to follow. I really actually can't explain it somehow. Sorry, but I just can't. It's strange. I've never thought about it, actually. It's always something that I actually, when I'm teaching someone or telling someone how to do something, I can never think, oh, how should I actually say, you know, who do you follow? Because I don't actually know myself how to explain it. It's just a natural thing that's just popped into my head. Yeah. I've actually been searching for a way to tell someone that for ages.
It's going to bug you now, isn't it? Now I've asked that question.
Yeah.
I think that's very, very common. I mean, we'll find out from the other panelists if they're in the same position. But I certainly relate to that. Annie, so what would be the ART answer to that, or just, you know, in your experience as a teacher, how do you talk about following and treble passing and that sort of thing?
I wish I had an answer as good as Dylan's. Really, I rely totally on rope sight when I'm ringing. I think it's my friend. I don't know why, but I find it easy to, you know, if it's a good circle, I find it very easy to see the ropes. But I think Dylan is right when he says that he looks centrally, because I think people do, you know, sometimes people are trying to move their heads around, and I think that's a bad thing. I think you can't do that. You've got to decide how you're seeing the other ropes and the other ringers, and of course listening as well. They go together. So I suppose what I would be saying to somebody if I was working, I would say it's about all of the senses. So it's about knowing the theory, it's about keeping your wits about you, it's about listening, hearing your own bell, and also keeping keeping your eyes open for the rope sight while you're ringing.
Yeah, that's quite close to me as well. Actually, I've got lots. I can relate to lots of this. I like rope sight as well. I have to admit, I like that visual aid. Hey, Mark, what's your how do you approach it?
Yeah, I use rope sight and listening. I use everything I can get my hands on, but I think to develop rope sight, there are two things I think that you can do. One is cheat a bit and make it easier, and the second is stretch your rope sight and make it harder. So they're two opposite ends to helping it. So the way you can make it easier is to either ring on fewer bells, or if you're already on kind of maybe 5, actually, and on any numbers of bells, this is a good thing to do, is actually learn some of the numbers. Now, certainly in the old days, many ringing teachers will tell you, don't learn the numbers, you mustn't learn the numbers, you must look. But actually, of course, that's what conductors do. You know, they're looking at the numbers of the bells they're passing, looking at the coursing orders. And actually, I think more young people, when they start to ring, or people of any age, should learn about that. And then we'd have more people becoming conductors and composers. So actually, if you're ringing, say, playing Bob on 5, the order you pass the bells in is pretty straightforward. You know, the bells always come at you in the order 2, 4, 5, 3. I mean, you might be ringing one of those. So if you're ringing the second, it's 4, 5, 3. And then the treble kind of pops up in random places, but the 4, 5, 3 will already be in that order. So if you learn that, you can use it to help your rope sight. So you know which bell, or you've got a good idea which bell's coming next. And then you can look and see with your rope sight and just check that it is that one. So that takes the pressure off your rope sight and allows you to practice it more. And the other thing is, once you get that ability, particularly on 5 bells, if you're ringing on 5 or whatever, you know, the normal number of bells is in your tower, when you get the ability to get that simple level of rope sight, you know, perhaps with a bit of help from knowing what the order of the numbers is, then start to stretch it. And the way you stretch it is to do things like go somewhere where they've got more bells. So if you're used to ringing on 5, go somewhere where they've got 7 and ask to ring plain hunt. Or if you're standing out, you can look and see if you can follow, because you'll be a slightly different, you know, viewpoint, won't you, if you're sitting on a bench. So the rope sight is slightly more awkward, but try and use it to follow the path of one bell through. And then if you get, you've got to be careful with this, but you can, if you get your rope sight gets pretty good, continue to stretch it. So if you're, say, ringing 7 triples, say, and you've got perfect rope sight for 7 triples. I mean, the method you're ringing has an effect on the rope sight. A method like stepping is harder because the bells are more random order. But if your rope sight, you know, is not stressed by ringing 7 triples, then see whether you can spot when you're dodging in 6, 7 at the back. See if you can spot who's leading right or wrong on the front. Okay, and if you stretch your rope sight like that, it'll continue to improve. And there's no limit to how good your rope sight can get. It's not just about spotting which bell you're following. So in an ideal world, you'd be able to ring on 16 bells and see the precise order those bells are ringing in every change. I don't think there's many people capable of doing that, but that's the final target for your rope sight. And if you can do that, it's amazing how easy ringing becomes, because you can see the whole pattern of the method unfolding around you. You can see where the treble is, where the other bell's working with you. So obviously the person who's asked this question, that's what I'm talking about at this stage sounds impossible. That's a pipe dream. That's you know, just sounds unachievable. But that's the goal you're working towards, all right? And to do it, work in tiny little steps. So break it up into tiny little steps. Work on playing Bob first. Learn the numbers if you have to. Try Grantzer. Try and look at bells when you're sitting out. Stretch your rope sight. It does take years, but it's about getting that pattern matching, the pattern matching of what's happening there and the tangle of ropes into your subconscious, so your subconscious can untangle it for you and say where everybody is.
That's really inspiring. I'm all of a sudden thinking, wow, that's incredible. I'm thinking of all these things you just mentioned. I've never thought about happening since.
That's all rope sight. I think that's another thing that people aren't taught when they begin. They say rope sight is just which bell you follow. Well, it absolutely isn't. It goes much further than that. It's much more useful, and is actually what makes really clever ringers clever. It's not really the power of their brains and the intellect. When you see somebody, you know, ringing Bristol Maximus and they appear to be ringing it without paying any attention, they're looking at the peel boards. You know, you think they must be so clever, their brain must be so huge. And it's not that, it's just they got very good rope sight. And so they can look at the peel board and out the corner of their eye, or eye and ear. It's the combination of the two. They can sense where they are and where everybody else is, and where the treble is. So you don't even have to remember the blue line in anymore. If you can hear or see where the treble is in a method, that information just tells you what to do next. I'm here, the treble's there in the second half of the lead, therefore I'm doing this piece of work. And that's how clever ringers ring. It's not about brain power, it's mostly about, I call it rope sense, actually, because I think that's a better term than rope sight, because it is a combination of sound and vision.
Yeah, sounds like witchcraft, doesn't it? But it really is.
Well, yeah. But it's like most things in ringing. It's one of the amazing things about ringing. It's all about training your subconscious. So it's about finding out how to do something with your conscious mind. So as I said, those little exercises that I went through, you can consciously focus on those. But the idea isn't to use your conscious mind to do it in the long term. It's to focus on it consciously so you can get that imprinted in your subconscious. So your subconscious is then doing it for you. That's the aim.
Amazing.
Hope that helps. It may have put you off completely, but
and Will, I mean, what's the advantage of being a musician in all this? Is it, you know, do musicians find it easier or harder? I've struggled with that question myself a lot over the years, whether it makes life easier or not. Do you think?
Yeah,
being a musician?
Swings and roundabouts, I think. I've always relied quite heavily on rope sight, actually, and it's sort of only a few years ago, actually, I was ringing with a handbell band, and we were trying something very difficult. And at the same time, I was training with a 12-bell band for the 12-bell final for the national striking contest. And I went through one of those times where you kind of change the way that you think about things, and it makes you a bit worse for a while, but then eventually you hope it makes you better. And that was about kind of ditching rope sight. And up till then I'd rung hundreds of peels and always been very rope sight focused, because it's a tool, and it's consistent, even though it's not consistent. You have to learn, when you're learning how to strike really well, you have to learn which bells are struck in which way. But once you've done that, it sticks like that during the performance. But ultimately, I think listening, I mean, we're making a sound, right? So listening is the final, that's the final marker. So whether being a musician helps, I think it does with the listening, because hard as it is to describe to someone how they can obtain rope sight, it is way harder to try and write or describe how to learn listening skills. That's true. And there's loads of people who have tried and written very wafty stuff that's very hard to get. So and the problem is that it's very easy to kind of stop at rope sight and not be constantly stretching yourself to get those listening skills. So yeah, I find it easy, for instance, to pick the treble out with my ear, but some people don't, especially when you get to the middle bells. But I think I agree with so many of Mark's points. Make it easier, but also make it harder. You're getting it into your subconscious. I think the point he didn't make about that was be patient as well.
It takes years, yeah.
Exactly. Don't think that it's something that you try, right, today I'm going to work on my rope sight, and if you don't get it, it won't work. Actually, come back the next day and see whether the work that you did on it made a difference, because it'll be the next day when your brain has slept on it and digested it and turned it into a skill,
Yeah, and I've been ringing since the 1980s, and I'm still improving my rope sight and still working on it. Yeah, so it's a lifetime thing. Yeah.
It made me, when you said about really good conductors having excellent rope sight, it made me remember I used to ring with an excellent conductor, and he usually looked down at the floor, and then when things sort of fell apart, he would sort of look up, and there'd just been these few seconds where he was just looking around and he was just kind of computing what was going on visually, and then he'd start barking orders, It was amazing. It was amazing to watch that process of kind of, I don't really know, I was doing such and such, what's going on, turn what I see into numbers, I guess, in his head, and then turn it into corrections.
Very impressive, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's nothing more, not off-putting, but nothing more arresting than a conductor's head that snaps up in the course. You know, there's something about that, but they can do it before the mistake happens sometimes, can't they? The really good ones.
I've seen, there's a friend of mine I've seen who, you know, has been just chatting to somebody in the corner of the tower, and there's ringing going on just on a practice night, and he's not apparently aware of what's happening, and it's some fairly high level stuff being rung, and it starts to go crang, 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 and he stops his conversation, head goes up, 7, come down, 0.5, and then goes back to his conversation. So in the background, his ears, because he wasn't even facing the ring, his ears were absorbing all that, and kind of subconscious was keeping track of what was going on. And you know, not many of us will get to that level, but it's good to have, you know, goals to aspire to, isn't it?
But it's the same basic skills that enable someone to do that as well as doing bob doubles on a
yes,
practice night, isn't it? It's the same basic stuff that we do.
It is. Yeah, it's just listening. Yeah, I mean, it's using your senses primarily, obviously, listening and seeing. But I do like to use both. Certainly, when you're in the tower. Actually listening is critical because striking is so hard on tower bells, but actually rope sight also becomes really, really useful because of the delay between pulling off. So the rope sight gives you an earlier indication of what the sound will be than the sound does, because it's half a second or more before the bell strikes.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that was really, really interesting discussion. Thank you. And actually the next question is very related to this. I didn't think it would segue quite as neatly as it does, but it's perfect. So now we've established what we have to do to develop rope sight. When will learners be able to develop the rope skills again? When will we actually get in the end of a rope? Annie, what do you think?
Well, the guidance from the Central Council says that youth groups can meet from Monday, which is rather exciting. You know, for up to an hour, and there's quite clear guidance that they've given to us. It won't be in the teaching format, I think, because, you know, we've got to think about social distancing. So when I'm talking about physically with the rope handling, but I think that's a start, and I'm delighted that that's a start. It's interesting because I've had some questions come through because we were ringing last Sunday for Easter. A number of our towers in our guild rang last week, and they're saying, what's the guidance for this week and going forward? And of course, guidance is unchanged, really, until the 17th of May. And now I'm not sure if the Central Council will be putting out some more guidance for us over the next couple of weeks. I hope they are. I'm very pleased with the guidance that we've received about ringing for His Royal Highness. I think that's been useful. But I think we probably have to be patient a little while longer to get the rest of us back into towers and practicing. I don't wish to be pessimistic. What we've said to some of our towers is if the vicars are happy, if the services are occurring and the vicars are happy for the bells to be rung, then providing the ringers are happy too, and they abide the social distancing and wearing of masks, that's the decision for that parish to make. We've not put out any guidance about that because we are conscious that there was nothing out really for Easter Sunday that changed what had happened previously. So we've been trying to work within that guidance. But I think my view, apart from with young people, and I wanted to get young people together next week. We've got a tower in our guild where it's a chancel ring. So it's plenty of space. It's not too high. It's not too long a draft. So again, we think it would be I think it will be a suitable tower, and I have permission to take the young people there. My problem is, of course, you've got to get them there. And if it's all right if it's in a town, but in these rural village communities, you know, I can't really take children in the car, so I'm going to rely on parents to take them. And the guidance says don't let them hang around the church, the tower door. Well, we've got all this space in this church, but again, the guidance is still quite clear about indoors. So I think I'm going to have to wait for a couple more weeks and see what happens, maybe learn from other people. And that's the beauty again of the recovery champions. We can see what people are doing and what works in different areas, share that intelligence with people so that we can then form a view about what to do. But I have informed all of Coventry Spires about the change in the rules, and we've been having meetings, ringing room meetings, just to have a discussion. They've not been very popular, I have to say. And I think we're going to have to see how it what happens in the next couple of weeks. So I don't want to sit on the fence, Andrew, but I think that's about the most honest I can be at the moment.
Suck it and see, isn't it? Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really good to see the acknowledgement of the link between ringing and mental health, isn't it? I mean, that's very much behind the youth work and the getting young people out first and how important it is for them. And it's just seems a real levelling up of that playing field to an extent that we've all had to learn over the past year.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. It's quite interesting. I've not received, some people have come back to me and said, oh, it's not fair that the young people are going first. And I take a different view to that. I want the young people to go first because I think they are the future and we need to facilitate the opportunities for them to ring. And I think Simon's done exactly the right thing in giving that guidance and working with the, the bishops to get permissions to do that. And because of that, I would like to think that our guild, along with others, can somehow make this happen for the youth teams that we've got across the country.
Being young is precious, isn't it? You don't have a lot of time to be young, so you need to make the most of it. You're our age for an awfully long time.
But Mark was still young at 50.
Yes, I felt much younger when Chris said that. Felt me feel very good about myself.
We're all laughing with nerves.
Oh dear.
Young at 50. Mark, when do you think we'll get back on the end of the rope again? What's your view of the future?
I don't know. I mean, I'm hopeful that with the vaccination proceeding well, and last summer, even without vaccination, the virus went down to lower levels. So I'm hoping there's some. Well, I mean, in fact, what I expect is going to happen is actually in July or August we're going to have a heat wave. It's going to be a barbecue summer, and so we're going to be back up in the tower ringing our first quarter peals and peals with soft hands in a sweaty belfry. You know what's going to happen? It's going to be blood on the ropes. So that's my happy prediction. But yes, as to how long that lasts, whether we'll have a nice summer where we can do stuff and then we're back in trouble again, maybe with new variants of the virus. That virus can fight back. I just don't know. And how practical it'll be. We won't be ringing peals and quarter peals until we can ring probably non-social distance and without masks. So whether that will be this summer, I hope it will be. It'd be nice to get a couple of quarter peals run, wouldn't it? Blisters or not, but we will see. We have to be patient.
Yeah. Dylan, is ringing normal in New Zealand? I mean, I've said you've been back ringing for some time, but do you
completely
ring all your bells, or are there still restrictions of some sort?
Nah, it's completely normal.
So no masks, ring all the bells.
We've been visiting other towers like normal. There's no social distancing, no nothing.
We're not at all jealous.
Yeah. The only real restriction on the country is just basically you can't leave. The border's shut. And there's just general hygiene rules around this. I mean, you still have to wear masks on public transport and things, which is a relatively new thing. Previously in our, what we call level 1, you didn't have to wear masks on trains and things, but they changed that in case of another outbreak, because we had small ones pop up and they've escalated and people have suddenly go, oh crap, there's an outbreak, let's start wearing masks now. And it's like, oh, well, actually, if you're wearing them beforehand, it might help prevent it. And same with the contact tracing. People stop doing it. As soon as COVID goes away and drops down, they stop doing it. And they don't realise that's actually what prevents further outbreaks, is people, if they all know where they are, then they can actually limit the outbreak. And it really has worked, actually, in most cases.
Yeah, it's an amazing success story in New Zealand, isn't it?
Mm.
But I think it may be the case that we'll be wearing face masks on public transport and in some public places for many, many, many years, even after COVID-19 has probably vanished or just is an ordinary flu or whatever. Yeah, I think there's just social changes. Some of them will stay.
I was struck actually the other day. I was watching something on television and I was struck by how much our attitudes to contact have changed. There was an episode of
it's so weird seeing a crowd on TV.
Sorry?
Yeah, isn't it so weird seeing a crowd on TV?
Yeah. Well, it was an episode of Fawlty Towers and Barbara Fawlty was hugging and kissing and shaking a man's hand. It was like, oh, stop!
I know, yeah, that's horrible.
That's all a period of a year. None of us would have thought that a year ago. Incredible. Will, are we you worried about the risks? Are we putting the right weight on concern about risk? Are we too risk averse? Are we running headlong into a disaster? What do you think?
Wow, it's God. There's so much going on in every direction, isn't there? And yeah, at this point, you know, what is it? A year and a bit now. I think it's a mug's game making any predictions, because just at every stage, you know, I've tried to stay on top of the science and the journalism and the predictions, and at every stage things happen that in a way that you don't expect. You know, either I remember last summer when restrictions started lifting, and I was like, this is way too early. It's just going to come soaring back, and it didn't for ages, and that's strange. And then then we had a worse winter wave than the first one. I've sort of given up predicting at this point. I think it probably will be longer than we'd like. I find it really difficult to believe that everything's going to go back to normal on the 21st of June. There's a long way between being able to meet a dozen people inside and it being a good idea to open a nightclub, that kind of thing. And sadly, some of our ringing patterns aren't as good as others in that sense. You know, we do like traveling and sharing the same space. So yeah, are we too risk averse? No, but what I think has been a really sad thing has been intolerance of other people's views of risk, and far too much of working out whether I'm right and they're wrong. It's difficult, of course, but and it's been heightened by the fact that we've all been isolated, and therefore we've all taken in our own choice of news and information and opinions. But it's very difficult.
Very easy to criticise, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it, the irony is nobody. So we've got a tendency to be critical, but actually nobody knows the answers.
And the other thing, Andrew, I think we've been, as Will said, we've been isolating for so long. To use a Leicester word, we've all got a bit mardy, a bit grumpy. And, you know, I notice now things that are happening that normally people would brush aside, but everybody's got a comment about them now because we're all so fed up, really. You know, we all need to get out and do more. And I think I'm hoping that our good nature will come back as we're able to get out and do a bit more socialising because we've been locked up for so long.
They say it's going to rebound, don't they? They say we're going to enter another roaring 20s. It will. It's said to be all down to Spanish flu, and coming out of that was why the 20s were so extravagant. So it might be an exciting decade. It
might happen, yeah.
Right, let's move on to something. Well, I'd like to say something much less controversial, but this may not be less controversial. For how many years does the panel think the Ringing World will remain as a print edition? Sorry, Will, we have to come to you first on that one.
Oh no, I'd be really interested to hear other people's opinions first.
Sure. The floor is open. Who's got a view in that?
Well, I don't know. I have to say, the Ringing World has been in my house as long as I can remember, and I remember we used to have to go to the news agents to get it in the old days. So I can remember it from about 1962. I suppose I can remember it from.
The wrapper that went around it.
The wrapper. That's exactly right. You know, and it was about £1, I think. I can't remember, but you know. So will it be in paper format for so long? I don't know. I do tend to read my paper copy rather than the electronic copy. But if I'm away, then I will read it online. I think it's a service to many towers and to many other ringers. I'm looking at the age profile of many ringers, but I'm not entirely sure that these elderly people buy it. I think they probably read the tower copy rather than pay for it. I don't know, Will, you would know whether that's right or wrong. So I suppose I think they might be numbered. And I hate to say that because I do value it being in paper format, but I think being practical, maybe it's not.
Would you pay more for a paper copy? Would you pay £5?
Well, personally, I would, but I have to recognise, Andrew, that Bellringers don't like parting with money. You know, if anything's got a price tag to it, sometimes there's a bit of a problem. And I've started a Get Fit for Ringing exercise group, and it's £4 a session, which is half the price of going to Pilates or yoga. However, it's still £4. So I think enthusiasts will pay more and it will put off others. And I don't think there's an easy answer to that.
Yeah,
I'm afraid.
I have to say that I've read the electronic copy for some time, and I think and I like that. I mean, I do like print and I like real things. I mean, I've having a printed copy of stuff is good, particularly if it's a book. But if it's something more ephemeral than a book, then having it on your screen is perfectly fine. It's probably better. I did when I had the printed Ringing World. I kind of didn't like the way they all built up in a great big pile, and then I didn't know what to do with them. So I think online is good, and that's probably the way forward. I think. I think it is a necessary and important part of the fabric of ringing. I really do. If you imagine a world without it, it's one of the things that keeps ringers together. It's not the only thing anymore because there's lots of other online stuff, but I think it's a really important thing. And I think that having something like that and having some journalism to go along with it too is really important. I think what Will has done with it has been fantastic. Just to sing Will's praises and embarrass him, I think particularly in the period of the pandemic where there's apparently no ringing, nothing. Why would what would you have to print? But he's done a fantastic job of making it almost more interesting than it was. But I think, the PDF copy is excellent. It just needs to be somehow more. I suppose the thing about the paper copy is it drops you your letterbox and it's there and you can go get it, read it with your morning coffee. Whereas it just needs something equivalent of that letterbox. Otherwise, I have to remember. Oh, it's Friday. I can go to the Ringing World website and download my my copy. It needs to ping through to me, but I do like the online version, and I think the future's there. And I think the format, though, I think that's probably what we need. A weekly magazine is great. Yeah.
I agree. Dylan, to use an old-fashioned turn of phrase, do you take the Ringing World?
Well, my tower captain sends out one, and we look at it online. I don't read real ones. I read fake ones. I read them online.
Yeah. Could you imagine a Ringing World with Can you imagine a world without the Ringing World? Is it an integral?
Yes. Yes. I mean, it has some fairly interesting articles in it a lot of the times. I particularly enjoyed the Worcester papers about the improvements they made to the ring a while ago. They were really fantastic. But it's a nice thing to read, but honestly I can't see a world without it. I'm sorry. I can. It's not something that I think about very much.
We'll ask you again in 30 years time.
Yeah. I have to say I can't. I think if we had a world without the Ringing World, we would be poorer. I think the Ringing World has a great role to play in keeping us together. One of many. I agree with Mark. One of many things, but I think it's vital to the exercise.
Sure. And Will, does that help you at all? Can you?
Well, I mean, you've
focus group basically.
Yeah. I mean, you've touched on so many of the important issues. Obviously, it means a lot. It means so much to me that it continues, and I'm very invested in it because I think it's a good thing for ringing. I think it's extraordinary, really. I mean, the number of times I have the conversation where I say to someone, what do you do? And I say, I edit a weekly magazine about bell ringing. And they're like, that exists? weekly. You know, it's amazing. So it's a shame because the decision to scrap the paper copy is always going to be hovering on the horizon, and perhaps it's a shame that I will feel that as a little bit of a failure, and so that as a personal failure, and so that may bias my decision as to whether it's actually the right thing to do, which it might well be at some point. I'm always stuck with about 5 years ago, maybe I had a conversation with someone who worked in local newspapers, but in the kind of consortia right at the top of that run loads of local newspapers. And he said, I just have so many conversations with people who their local newspapers closed, and they've said, you know, going online was the death of us. I think the paper format is so important, and I can't imagine doing the Ringing World online, because you know what that would mean? It would mean that Prince Philip passed away and they were expecting the Ringing World story straight away. You know, it would mean that something happens and they want the story straight away, and I'm supposed to put out the authoritative view instantly, and I can't live like that. The team's too small, you know.
It's partly why that weekly thing is good, because it's often enough that you can cover topical things. You can be there in the moment, but giving a more balanced view with time to reflect on it, perhaps.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I take as the goal, the kind of vision is actually, we report on topical stuff, but the more important thing is that we can get underneath it. And it doesn't matter actually if that takes an extra few weeks to get the story behind what was on Facebook. But it does mean change, because we lived for so long on reporting the news. That was the point. We were reporting what was going on, and you know, as time goes past, we just don't. That role is not necessary anymore. News travels automatically now, so we really have to live much more on that getting underneath the story and saying something more. So yeah, how long is the paper copy going to last? Whew.
Well, I would hope it never goes away completely, because you know, as an archival medium, I think it's good. And speaking purely selfishly, Will, if I have an article, say, published in the Ringing World, getting a paper copy of that is just a nice thing to have, isn't it? Look, here's my Ringing World where I had this little thing. So no, I mean, there's all sorts of things where nothing beats hard copy sometimes, but I think shifting it more and more online, getting more and more people reading online, and getting that getting a better process around that, perhaps.
All inspired me to convert my online subscription back to a paper one. I'm not sure who swung it, but between you've inspired me. Right, a couple of questions still to go. Next one's really for everybody, but I'll direct it a little bit. It's very current, very prescient. So, how many people have discussed civic and royal protocols, for example, London Bridge, with their church? Mark, do you want to start that one off? Have you discussed what to do when the Duke of Edinburgh dies or when the Queen dies?
Yes, I'm in the very privileged position. I've got people to do that for me. So in Ringing, I am one of those people who is I'm not a royalist. I'm quite happy with the royal family. I'm happy for people to be interested in them, but they've got very little interest for me, and I'm an atheist, and again, I respect people of religion, and I respect the fact that we ring bells in churches which are Christian buildings, but I'm very much apart from all of that, and I appreciate all the other parts of ringing. So if there's liaison to be done in that area, then there'll be people other than me doing it. There'll be my tower captain or secretary or whoever, and my skills are not really in being very well organized and liaising with people and finding out stuff about protocol. It's not really where my skills lie. So it's best if I'm kept away from all of that, and just. But I'm happy to come along and ring if anyone needs me.
How does it reach it in the Commonwealth, Dylan? Are these sort of things?
We still do them. I've already half muffled the bells for this morning we're going to be ringing them in about an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Apparently, well, actually, I only found out yesterday that we have to ring them half muffled until his funeral.
Yes.
So that could even be until practice night. So that'd be kind of cool.
It is cool ringing half muffled, isn't it? I mean, having the opportunity to do it is great.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And also what were we talking about? I was cleaning the bell tower and I found all these old leather muffles, and I thought, oh God, we've got new ones, we can throw them away. But apparently we need to keep them because we've only got enough for every bell half muffled, but we haven't got enough for them to be fully muffled. So when the Queen dies, we actually need those old muffles, and that's something that I think it's not like I don't want the Queen to die, but it would be very cool to ring fully muffled.
So the tower I learned to ring in, we had to fully muffle in practice night. It loses its shine after a little while, but yes, it's fun to do it for a couple of hours. Annie, have you discussed this with your church?
Only we discussed striking, tolling the bell at 12 o'clock today. We didn't think we would involve the church with that, which they were happy for us to do. And now we know that the funeral is at 3 o'clock next Saturday afternoon. We will go into conversation with the church about what they would like. I have to say, we will wait until the guidance comes out from the Central Council before we approach the church, I think. And as Guild Secretary, what I do and what I did with Vicky's thing that came out on Friday, as soon as it arrived, we send it out to all our members so that they know. And I was delighted to see on Bellboard that so many of our towers had tolled the bell today and recorded it as well. So that's good. And we will pull that out and make sure that we've got something for our guild to show too. And when it comes to hearing fully muffled ringing, I have to say I'm a bit like Dylan. I'm quite excited about that because I've never heard fully muffled ringing. The last monarch died in 52, and I don't think there has been any fully muffled, unless they rang for Winston Churchill fully muffled. I don't know, but they certainly didn't for the Queen Mother when she passed away. So I'm quite looking forward to that. I think we might have a problem in our tower though, Dylan, because I think we've only got 10 muffles. Oh. So I think we might need to think about that. And that's another conversation. And we got ours out today, and of course we didn't use them in November last year, so they hadn't been used for 18 months. Took the cobwebs off them and put them out. But the question was, have we had a dialogue with the church? And I'd have to be completely honest with you and say no. And maybe we need to think about that. Yeah.
It's certainly made us realise how dependent we are being told what to do, and maybe it's in preparation for some of these things that we don't want to happen but are inevitable because they happen to all of us.
That's right.
Can be planned in. And again, Will, sorry, I'm always saying Will of the ringing world, but what's the role of the press and the sort of drawing together of ringers in this? I think there's a need to publish some articles on advice what we should do to prepare for these big civic events.
I think our role is to say what people have done. To report. Certainly, when it comes to ringing for Prince Philip, there seems to have been less appetite to break the rules, as it were, than I was expecting. I don't think it's for me to say what you should and shouldn't do. It's for me because I'm representing the community here. So I think this is a topic where I just want to say this is what has happened. Now, obviously, I want to also create some interesting articles for people to read and that kind of thing. So that will be relevant. What was I going to say about civic duty, civic protocol? I can't remember, I'm afraid.
It's all right. Let me ask you a slightly second question. It might jog your memory, or it might come to you when you think about something else. But as a ringer, so I've neglected to ask you views and things as a ringer and as an ordinary person. But as a ringer, do you you worry about this? Do you think about what we're going to do in the future? What, do we need to get ready? Do we have enough muffles? What do we do if there's a? What do we do if there's a natural disaster? How do we respond to that? How do we link in with the statutory bodies?
Do I worry about that as a ringer? No, I think as a ringer, I'm more worried about the general future rather than the events in that future.
Yeah,
I just want to see more ringing. More ringers. We need a big recruitment campaign. We need more confident teachers, and we need more people doing the great things that are already happening. That's my feeling as a ringer. And I think Dylan has, Dylan is somewhere that can really teach us so much there, because if you throw a stone from the roof of my house, you could probably hit 5 different towers, and there's no, I mean, there is actually quite good teamwork in my area, but across England, you have that situation where there are just these thousands of towers and not enough integration. And then you look at places like New Zealand. I have a real interest in isolated places that have somehow managed to create a thriving ringing community. We have so much to learn from them.
Yeah, the ANZAP story and the American story is incredible, isn't it? Over the past 20 years, just seeing where they were 20 years ago and where they are now is amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I mean, you must be psychologically aligned to both me and Fiona Bruce, because my last question is really related to that very subject. So Will, what are your top tips for recruitment?
Whew.
Were you asking me?
No, it was to me, and I'm just considering my answer.
Yeah. Suddenly, were you asking me? Oh.
Everybody suddenly looks terrified. So of all the hard things we've asked, I'm surprised that was the one that's caused such a reaction.
Do things, do stuff, experiment. Don't just do what you're doing at the moment. Try some different stuff and see if it works, and look around at what other people are doing. One of the recruitment stories that sticks in my head from a couple of years ago is using a village or community Facebook groups. Your village probably has a Facebook group. Use that for ringing, and it's not all about getting recruits that will end up on the end of a rope. It's also about awareness. That's really valuable to you as well. So I think just doing loads of different stuff would be a top tip for recruitment. And now we have these new tools to do that with. Net people and keep going, get them to come along to the tower, but also get them to a ring room practice. Make sure you keep engaging them. Think of them as volunteers who haven't caught the bait yet, and keep enthusing them.
Sure. Good. Dylan, you've had a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
All the ringers moved away and you had to recruit some more. What would you be doing?
Yeah, I'd actually say the same as well, because the awareness part of it is so huge. We've had people turn up just from that aspect, because we've been. I did something. What did I do? I advertised a job online, a volunteer job on Facebook, and we had like 5 people look at us. Oh my god, that's more than I expected. And one was actually making really good progress on the mini ring, and then I think she had university things or something and had to go away, which was a real shame. But I think a really good thing, because we're in the middle of a city and we've got apartment blocks and things nearby, we were sort of thinking of making these little cards and invitation things and putting them in everyone's letterbox and saying, oh, we've got a tower open day, you're invited, and it makes them feel special, so they turn up and come to this open day. Well, we haven't done it yet, but I think it'll be a really good thing to do. Also, I brought a whole bunch of handbells to my school activity day, and we rang them all day. And I've got a few interested people who I'm actually teaching handbells at the moment.
Oh, wow.
And I'm sort of in the process of, I'm actually going to ask them tomorrow whether they're interested in learning tower bells, because the holidays are coming up. I've got plenty of time. I can teach them. So I think actually doing something like that, having people who are ringing handbells first and sort of going, oh, do you want to try this? Is also a really good thing to do. So that's just my point of view.
A friend of mine learned handbells before he learned tower bells. There's a routine there.
Yeah, I think what I was also thinking was, okay, because they're doing this handbell stuff, that's really difficult. You've got two. And then when they go to doing actual methods and things on tower bells, okay, it's only one. It's a lot easier in that sense. Obviously, the handling will get in the way, but it'll be easier in the method sense to just do one, because I've just been doing handbells, an easy transition down.
Yeah.
I hope. It might not be. But that's how it will.
You're right. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the, there's a job of propaganda to be done. There's a job of proselytizing ringing and explaining it to the world, because it is the most amazing thing. And I said, there's millions of people out there who would absolutely love it and be hooked. But I think one of the things it is one of those things that is really good for introverted people to enjoy a teamwork activity with other people. And I think you get lots of ringers who are, on the surface of it, quite friendly and outgoing, who are actually introverts like me. I'm the kind of person who enjoyed lockdown. Lockdown was great. And actually what people like me aren't very good at is doing the kind of warm, friendly, welcoming and hey, come here and I'll tell you about this. Why don't you come and try that? And actually, so there's two things about it, I think. One is we need to try and find more people and get more people involved who are that kind of warm, friendly, enthusiastic, extrovert person who can network and bring people in and enthuse people. The other thing is we need to explain it's also a really good thing for introverts to do, to get you out of the house and have fun and But actually, I think things may change, and I'm going to make a prediction for 100 years from now, which is really good, because not many of us will be able to tell whether it's comes true or not. And I'm thinking that ringing isn't threatened. I'm thinking that ringing is such an amazing thing, has got such amazing people always who'll be involved with it. It's never going to die out. But in 100 years' time, I think there may be actually potentially many more people involved in ringing than there are now. But it could be there's many more towers silent in Britain. And I think that ringing will become successful in other ways than keeping your local 6 ringing for services. I think over the next 100 and more years, we have to accept that special status of ringing as being the sound at the heart of every village in England. That is going to lessen. I mean, there'll be more and more churches will be closed. Is one thing, but I think ringing will move out of the village church and into the web and into centres of excellence and around the world. And I think we'll see a huge growth area in places other than England, and that will be a positive thing. I mean, I'll be very sad to see, village 6s and 8s fall out of action. But I think the future of ringing is probably safe. It just won't be the future. It won't look how we see it now.
There's lots of parallels in other heritage activities, isn't there, that are similar?
Yeah. But I think absolutely it will retain that heritage and that history. I mean, that's one of the amazing things about it. But the combination of the history, the ancient and the modern, the modern will become a little bit more uppermost. But the fact that it does have this rich history and it's connected back to this origin in the 17th century and before, and it's connected with amazing church architecture and the history of England, that will be forever important. But that will no longer be, that won't kind of hold it back maybe in the way that it is now.
Yeah. It's worth remembering that 100 years ago, a quarter peal was a very rare length to ring. People didn't ring quarter peals 100 years ago. And 150 years ago, service ringing was very rare.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
People didn't ring primarily for the half an hour before a service.
No.
So we've got to remember that what we inherit right now is only a point, in that great long process of change. We don't have to hold on to it at all costs.
No. Absolutely not. I mean, I certainly want to see ringers continue their partnership with the church and support service ring. Absolutely. I think that's an important part of many local communities, even though it's not a part that I'm actively involved with as a religious person. But actually, ringing will move beyond that. That'll remain a part of it, but not the centre of it.
Church life will be unrecognisable 100 years from now, won't it? And ringing will probably move with it.
Yeah.
Andy, what's in your list? What's your?
Well, I love all the ideas. I think all of the ideas are fantastic. And I have to say, when we started our ringing club at Warwick School, Dylan, we started with a handbell team and we taught them tunes, and that was a great way in. So I think that's a terrific thing to do. I like the idea of staying in touch with the community. One thing I'd like to do, particularly now, and it's probably a short-term thing, is I would love to reconnect with all the ringers that have lapsed. I can think of the local, just even around here, the people who we taught to ring or learn to ring as church. Yeah, and they don't come. And I'd love to have some sort of initiative to say, come back and see what's going on, see what you're missing, come and meet this, come and do that, and I would love to have some sort of initiative there and I think that's going to be so important as we start to recover, because of course teaching might be more difficult because of social distancing, whereas if we've got people who can handle a bell, it will make it a lot easier to get them back in. And then I think we would do a lot of recruitment, and I think it's going to be around physical activity, mental health, forming societies and being part of the community and getting people in, and that's going to be the hook to pull people in.
Yeah, really, really, really good closing statement. Thank you, Annie. That's summed it up perfectly. We are either out of time or almost out of time. We've got something less than a minute to go. There was one question from the floor, and I just want to put it out there because it's probably a yes/no answer from all of you. No more than a yes or a no, but it's a good question. So I'm not going to embarrass the question asker or her sister, actually. My sister is quite high profile within ringing circles. I support all she does, but I have no such aspirations myself. Do any of the panelists have siblings who ring, and is there any rivalry? So yes, no.
Yes.
Annie, yes.
I have a sister who rings.
And rivalry?
No, I'm heaps better than her.
I have a sister.
That's not true.
I have a sister who rings too, and she's doing amazing work in ringing room, getting people involved in ringing room and starting practices and ringing with all sorts of people. So yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. Dylan?
Nope, no siblings, so obviously no rivalry.
We'll just have to clone you then, Dylan, if you got this.
Any ringers in your family?
I have two siblings. They have both touched a rope. My brother actually got as far as ringing quarterfield's, but I've never rung with either of them. So sadly, no. But I wish I could one day.
I'm sure it'll happen. Maybe your brother's one of the people we can get back in, one of the re-recruits as we recover. Listen, thank you very much. Thanks from me and from the association to Annie, to Will, to Mark and to Dylan, particularly Dylan for getting up so early on a Sunday morning. We really appreciate it. I know at least one of us is at the pub that has to go, so I'm not going to drag this out any longer. Just something in the chat. Thank you very much from the association, and a few people saying here at the same time. So agree from me too. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time and your amazing conversation. Been really interesting, really helpful, and been a great addition to our course. And hopefully meet you all again soon, sometime in the near future. Hopefully at the end of a rope in a proper tower.
That would be brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
We'll arrange a course appeal. We'll do it. Double.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Cheerio.
Yeah.
Thank you.